To advise the member that the time has expired.
Very good speech.
I call Keith Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is an anti-union bill and the Green Party will be opposing it. The aim of this bill is to de-unionise the film industry. In this debate over the last day, speaker after speaker from the national side, the government side, have been demonising the actors' unions. Clearly, in the Green point of view, we support the unions. The Green Party stands beside Actors' Equity and the MEAA, the Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance, in trying to protect the paying conditions of actors. And it's hypocritical for the government to engage in Aussie union bashing. The MEAA is a trans-Tasman organisation like many others in the business field, the professional field, the sporting field, and they are welcome as long as New Zealand, the New Zealand component, has a proper voice in the organisation. They generally strengthen the professional body, the union body, whatever it is, on both sides of the Tasman. There's a very strong reason for New Zealand actors to be part of this trans-Tasman union. One of them is that many actors have to work on both sides of the Tasman, so it makes sense for them to belong to one union and to have some coordination in union work and pay and conditions. This bill is rightly being called the Warner's Bill because it came out of a deal with that multinational film company, and the change in this law was actually a law to weaken unions, was a condition that Warner's put on having the film made here. And it sets an incredibly bad precedent. What next? Will McDonald's, another big American multinational, come down here and say, look, you can't keep putting the minimum wage up because a lot of our workers, we're having to put their wages up because you're putting the minimum wage up, and we might pull our restaurants out, or some sort of leverage like that. Even the New Zealand Herald, which is not necessarily the most left-wing, pro-green, pro-union newspaper in the land, it has a headline, "Price to keep Hobbit in New Zealand is extortionate." And I think that's true. It's quite a good editorial. The real villain in this piece was not the unions, but Warner's, with John Key, Peter Jackson and Richard Taylor acting as supporting actors. In fact, it's unfortunate. I have a great respect for Peter Jackson and Richard Taylor for their work here, but they, along with John Key in this case, were helping Warner's screw New Zealand, screw the film workers, and cost us a lot in terms of what monies had to be provided to them and this law that's passing through Parliament. By sort of all this panic about it being a national disaster if the Hobbit wasn't made here, the protests that Richard Taylor and Peter Jackson organised of Weta workshop workers, the scapegoating of the Actors Union, that meant that when Warner's arrived on our shores, they knew that our government was putty in their hands, because their government had said, you know, basically, what do you want? And Warner's was able to manipulate that sort of deal that the Herald calls extortionate. And we don't even know where the money's coming from. This extra $10 million to market the Hobbit, there's an article in the Dominion this morning, nobody knows whether it's coming out of the tourism budget or what it is. It was just John Key saying, here, have it. And what the Herald said, and I think it's correct, is that while it's great to have the Hobbit here, and the Green Party is totally supportive of that, quote, it is, quote, not important enough for New Zealand to jettison part of its workplace law and compromise its economic principles, end quote. The government didn't have any bottom line whatsoever. I want to pay again a tribute to the unions on behalf of the Green Party for what they've done through this whole saga. What did they do? Let's go over it. For a long period, over many months, they pressed simply for a discussion on pay and conditions over the Hobbit production with Warner's. For month after month, Warner's refused to even sit down and talk. So what did they do next? The International Federation of Actors came in, and it's good that they come into things like this because it's normal union activity. There's a lot of these bodies. There's a group called the International Transport Federation that looks after seamen's pay and conditions in different ports around the world, very highly coordinated between different national unions of transport workers. The International Federation of Actors is a good organisation, and its aim is to stop what they call runaway productions. That is a drive to the bottom where countries don't de-unionise workforces, pay poor conditions and lower the standards in the film industry as a whole internationally. And it's a perfectly legitimate tactic in that union tax can be used over and over to put a hiring ban on a particular film or whatever in that context. There's nothing wrong with that as a tactic. I won't comment on all the controversies taking place over the union, PR or the timing or all those issues, and I don't think it's useful to be an armchair commentator and say, oh, the union did this wrong at that time, when most of us, none of us really, are close enough to the particular situation to know. But the general tactic of trying to use union activity and union solidarity across the world to try and get a meeting, just a meeting between the Actors Union and Warner's was correct. And the viciousness of the response was something to behold, including the sort of whipping up of protests outside Actors' Equity meetings, personal threats, and they're listed in the Herald this morning, and I want to here pay tribute particularly to some of those that were threatened. Robin Malcolm, Jennifer Ward Leyland and Helen Kelly. I want to pay particular tribute for them for standing up, and I hope they'll continue to stand up for actors' rights. Actually, instead of going on about union bashing, perhaps we should have a look at what how the film industry operates in Australia. And there they don't go just dishing out money to companies like Warner's. They actually give a much higher contribution to locally Australian-produced films. I think they get something like a 40% tax rate, something pretty substantial, and they have a really dynamic film industry, and also they have a much better relationship between the film companies and the unions, and that's the sort of thing we should be working towards. There's been a lot of talk in this debate about the national interest, and Nick Smith, I think, talked about, this is all about the national interest. Well, it's not in the national interest to sell your soul to a foreign multinational like Warner Brothers and rush through an urgency legislation that is both confusing, will be subject to all sorts of legal challenges and undermines workers' rights in this country, particularly in the film industry, but it could easily be extended to other workers. It's the way the Green Party looks at it, the national interest is the rights of people and the rights of workers, and having legislation to protect particularly those who are low paid, particularly those who are in vulnerable circumstances. And film workers are in vulnerable circumstances because of the intermittent and temporary nature of employment. It makes it more difficult for them to exercise the normal influence that unions can exercise to get decent pay and conditions. So rather than having less rights, in some ways you could argue they should have more rights. And I think that this bill itself, I said previously that it could be extended to other workers. There's no particular reason to single out film workers in legislation, and in fact the term film workers in this bill covers everyone, including someone who might be employed 8 hours a day, a regular shift, to sweep the floor of a film set. They're part of the film workforce. In every other respect in our Employment Relations Act, they would be considered an employee. Under this, the company can come to them and say, look, if you want this job sweeping the floor, I know in every respect you're an employee, but you've got to say you're an independent contractor, and then you lose all your rights under the Employment Relations Act. You have no rights. You just have to work for whatever we want and with the conditions that we want. Thank you. And so the Green Party will be opposing this bill. It is one of the most undermining of people's rights bill that's ever been in this Parliament, and the way it's been rushed through in urgency without the ability of employers, unionists, members of the community, MPs to properly address the problems in it is shameful. And already Kate Wilkinson, the Minister of Labour, has admitted this by moving to amendments